Chicago, Illinois. Wabash Avenue Barbershop, South Loop District, May 4, 1972. Thursday afternoon, 3:40 p.m. The barbershop has been on Wabash Avenue since 1954. Not in the way that chain businesses occupy addresses, which is to say interchangeably, the specific location mattering less than the brand that the location carries. In the way that neighborhood institutions occupy their addresses, which is to say inseparably. The building and the business and the people who run the business and the people who use the business having developed over 18 years the specific mutual dependency that produces real places rather than commercial locations. The barber's name is Raymond Dubois. He is 53 years old, and he has been cutting hair in this specific shop since he bought it from its previous owner in 1957. And before that, he cut hair in this specific shop as an employee for 3 years, and before that he trained under the previous owner as an apprentice. And the sum of all those years is a man who knows this room and this street and this neighborhood with the completeness that only time of that duration and quality produces. The shop has 4 chairs on this Thursday afternoon. 3 of them are occupied. Raymond is working on a man in the second chair, a regular named Marcus who comes every 3 weeks, with the reliability of someone for whom the appointment is not maintenance but ritual, the specific ritual of a man who understands that sitting in a good barber's chair and receiving good work, and talking or not talking according to the day's requirement, is one of the few genuine rest experiences available to a person whose life does not otherwise produce many of them. In the first chair, Raymond's nephew Jerome is working on a younger man, early 20s, who has brought in a photograph of the cut he wants and who is explaining the photograph in more detail than Jerome needs, but less detail than the young man believes he needs. The fourth chair is empty and has a waiting customer sitting across from it in one of the 5 wooden chairs along the west wall, reading a newspaper with the slightly performed patience of someone who has been waiting longer than they expected, but who has decided that the quality of the shop justifies the additional time. Bruce Lee came in 20 minutes ago. He is in the third chair. He came in without an appointment because he is in Chicago for 2 days, a private commitment that brought him to the city and that has given him an unexpected afternoon with no scheduled obligations. And he found the barbershop on Wabash by the specific method he uses to find things in cities he does not know well, which is walking until something presents itself with the quality of being genuinely what it claims to be rather than what it is trying to appear to be. The barbershop on Wabash presented itself this way. He came in. He is being worked on by a barber named Eddie, Raymond's second employee, 28 years old, 5 years in the shop. Good hands and a quality of attention to the work that Raymond identified when he hired Eddie as the quality that separates barbers who are service providers from barbers who are craftsmen. Eddie is working with the focused quiet of a craftsman who has a good subject and who is doing good work, and who requires no conversation to do it, and neither, apparently, does his subject, which is a dynamic that Eddie finds more comfortable than its alternative, and that is producing the specific atmosphere of the third chair this Thursday afternoon. The shop has the smell of all good barbershops, bay, rum, and pomade, and the clean, sharp smell of scissored hair, and underneath it the specific warm human smell of a room that has held people doing ordinary necessary things for 18 years. The radio on the shelf above the fourth chair is playing something that Raymond has not changed in the several hours since he turned it on, because the station is playing things he likes, and he sees no reason to introduce a variable. The Wabash Avenue traffic produces its ambient sound through the front glass. It is a Thursday afternoon. It is ordinary. Then the door opens. Not the way the door has opened for the previous customers, which is the way doors open when the person opening them has an ordinary purpose and is executing that purpose with the ordinary physical commitment that ordinary purposes require. The way the door opens when the person opening it is not coming in for a haircut and is not coming in because the shop is on their route and they need to ask directions, and is not coming in for any of the reasons that doors to barbershops open during Thursday afternoons on Wabash Avenue. It opens with intention. 5 of them come through the door in the specific order that 5 people come through a door when the order has been arranged in advance, the largest one first, and the others in a specific configuration that is not accidental, and that people who know what it means recognize before their conscious mind has finished identifying it. The largest one is 6 feet 2, perhaps 230 pounds, wearing a jacket in the specific May weather way, that jackets are sometimes worn when the weather does not require them for warmth. The other 4 range in size and carry themselves with the specific quality of people who are here because a group decision was made and they are participants in the execution of that decision rather than its authors. Raymond knows them, not personally, in the neighborhood way. The way that a person who has been in the same location doing the same work for 18 years comes to know the human geography of the area around them. The groups and the patterns and the specific situations that particular combinations of people in particular configurations represent when they appear in your doorway on a Thursday afternoon. He knows what this is. His hands continue their work on Marcus in the second chair. His body does not change its posture or its movement. His face does not change its expression. He has been on Wabash Avenue for 18 years, and this is not the first time this doorway has held what it is holding now, and he has developed over those 18 years the specific quality of response to this situation that the situation has taught him, which is to be entirely what he is and to do entirely what he does, and to not provide the situation with anything it can use as a starting point. He says, "Gentlemen, we are running about 40 minutes on the wait. The largest one does not look at Raymond, he looks at Bruce." The looking has the quality of looking that people do when they have already identified what they came to look at before they came in, and the act of looking upon arrival is confirmation rather than search. He has been looking at the third chair since he came through the door. Everything else in the shop, Raymond and Jerome and Eddie, and the customers in the chairs, and the customer on the wall bench with the newspaper, exists in his peripheral vision rather than his actual vision. His actual vision has found what it came for. He says to no one specifically and to everyone specifically, "Look at this." Came all the way to Chicago. His voice carries the specific quality of a voice that is performing for its own group rather than communicating with its apparent target. That is, using the target as the occasion for a display that is primarily about the internal dynamics of the group doing the displaying. Bruce is in the third chair. Eddie's hands have stopped, not completely. The scissors are still near the subject's head, but the movement has interrupted itself in the way that movement interrupts itself when the room it is operating in has changed in a way that requires the person moving to gather new information before continuing. Bruce is looking at the largest one in the mirror. The mirror in a barbershop is not a neutral piece of glass. It is the specific reflective instrument of a space designed around the act of looking at oneself and being looked at, and it has in the specific context of the third chair at Eddie's station a particular quality, a particular angle, and a particular distance that makes the face in it more fully visible than faces usually are in ordinary social encounters, that removes the usual occlusions of angle and distance, and presents the complete expression of the face to anyone who looks at the mirror at the right moment. The face in the mirror is Bruce Lee's face. What the largest one sees in the mirror when he looks at it is an expression that he was not anticipating, and that does not fit within the categories of expression that his previous experience with situations like this one has provided. The expressions that situations like this one typically produce in their targets are recognizable and limited. There is fear, which produces one set of physical signs. There is the performance of not fear, which produces a different set of physical signs that are ultimately readable as the performance of not fear rather than the genuine article, because the performance of not fear requires effort, and effort is visible. There is the combination of both, which is the most common expression and which is the most honest expression, because most people in most situations like this one feel both things, and the combination of both produces the expression of both. The face in the mirror has none of these. It has an expression that is not performing anything, and is not managing anything, and is not producing a response to the situation designed to communicate a desired message about the internal state of the person producing the expression. It is simply the face of a person who is in a barbershop chair having their hair cut, and who has become aware that something has entered the room that warrants attention, and who is giving that something the quality of attention it warrants, complete and without performance. The largest one holds the mirror's gaze for a moment. He says something. The accounts of this moment from Raymond and Eddie and Marcus and Jerome's customer, and the man on the bench with the newspaper all preserve the fact that something was said and differ in their specific recollection of what was said in the way that accounts of spoken words in high-stimulus situations always differ. They agree on the substance. The substance is a statement that combines a claim about Bruce Lee's presence in this neighborhood at this time, and a statement about what the largest one's group intends to do about that presence. The statement contains references to Bruce's ethnicity that are designed to perform a specific function, which is to locate Bruce within a category that the group has already decided warrants the specific attention it has come to provide. Bruce does not respond immediately. He is quiet in the mirror for a moment. Eddie's hands have fully stopped. The scissors are down. He is standing in the way that people stand when they have realized that the thing happening in the room requires them to not be moving, so that all of their attention is available for tracking the thing. Raymond has also stopped. Marcus in his chair is very still. Jerome is still. Jerome's customer is still. The man on the bench has put down his newspaper with the careful attention of a person who wants to know where his hands are. Bruce says, "I am getting a haircut." He says it with the quality that he says everything, not performing evenness, simply even, the voice of a person who has accurately described the situation and is making the description available to everyone in the room in case the description is useful. The largest one takes a step further into the shop. The four behind him redistribute themselves in the specific way that suggests the redistribution was choreographed in advance, which it was, each person occupying a position that covers a portion of the shop's geography in a way that is not random. The largest one says, "Not anymore." Two of the four move toward the third chair. What happens in the following 60 seconds is a thing that the 6 people in the barbershop on Wabash Avenue who witness it will spend the rest of their lives not talking about publicly, and all of the rest of their lives understanding privately with a completeness that does not require talking, in the way that the most significant experiences of a life do not require talking because they have been absorbed into the person at a level that is below the level where talking operates. They will not talk about it because what they witnessed defies the kind of description that talking produces, not because the events are complicated, because the events are in fact the opposite of complicated. They are the most direct and economical sequence of events possible given the situation that produced them, but because the directness and the economy of the sequence occurred at a speed that the human observational system was not able to process in real time, and that the retrospective reconstruction that talking requires does not successfully reassemble because the pieces of the retrospective reconstruction do not fit together into a sequence that makes causal sense at the speed the sequence actually ran. They will say, "It was fast." They will say, "I did not see what happened. I only saw what had happened." They will say, "One moment there were 5 of them standing, and the next moment there were not 5 of them standing." These are the descriptions. They are accurate. They are incomplete in the way that all accurate descriptions of things that exceed the describing apparatus are incomplete. Here is what can be said with the confidence of what Raymond and Eddie and Marcus between them observed from their respective positions in the shop, assembled into a composite account that is more complete than any single account. The two who moved toward the third chair reached the third chair and found that the third chair was not occupied by the person it had been occupied by, because that person was no longer in the chair, in the way that a person is in a chair when they are sitting in it, receiving a haircut, was instead present in the space in the specific non-seated way that allows for the kind of movement that the third chair does not allow. The transition between seated and not seated produced no sound that anyone in the room registered as a precursor to what followed. There was no sound of preparation, no sound of standing, no intake of breath that the body takes before demanding a significant output. There was the haircut, and then there was what was not the haircut. The first of the two who moved toward the chair encountered something at his left side that addressed the specific mechanical configuration of his forward committed movement in the way that Bruce's left hand had addressed Petty Officer Marsh's grip and Kowalski's punch and Seagal's reaching hand. Finding in the configuration of the committed movement the specific point where the movement's own energy could be received and returned along a direction that the movement's origin did not intend. He went down, not hard, controlled. The floor of Raymond's barbershop received him with the care that Bruce's application of force always included in its calculation. The care that was not mercy exactly, but was the specific operational principle of someone who used the minimum force required to achieve the required outcome and no force beyond that minimum. The second encountered something at his right side in the fraction of a second following the first's contact with the floor, something that his nervous system registered and responded to with the shutdown response that the specific nerve cluster addressed had been selected to produce. He went down beside the first. The three remaining, including the largest one, had in the time that the first two took to reach the floor received the information that the floor contained and were processing that information with the urgency that the information demanded. The processing was not fast enough. The largest one moved forward with the specific commitment of a person who has decided that moving forward is the response that the situation requires and who has the physical scale to believe that the belief is justified. He is 230 pounds, and he has been the largest person in every room he has been in for most of his adult life, and the experience of being the largest person in every room has produced in him the deep and mostly reliable understanding that the largest person in the room is the person the room accommodates. He reached Bruce. What he reached was not what he was reaching for. Not because Bruce moved away, because Bruce moved in the specific direction that removes from a large, committed, forward-moving person the mechanical advantage that large, committed forward movement is designed to provide, the direction that converts the large person's mass from an asset to a liability in the fraction of a second that the conversion requires. The largest one's own forward momentum, all 230 pounds of it organized toward a specific destination, arrived at a destination it had not chosen, the floor. He landed without the injury that 230 pounds landing on a floor would typically produce because the path to the floor was managed, the trajectory controlled with the same care that had governed the paths of the first two, the minimum force producing the required outcome with nothing beyond it. The fourth and the fifth were addressed in the time remaining in the 60 seconds with the same economy and the same control and the same absence of anything beyond what was required. 60 seconds, the barbershop on Wabash Avenue contains 5 people on the floor and 1 person standing. The person standing is at the third chair. He sits back down. He looks at Eddie in the mirror. He says, "I believe you were not finished." Eddie looks at him in the mirror for a moment. Eddie is 28 years old, and he has worked in this shop for 5 years, and he has seen things on Wabash Avenue in those 5 years that his previous life did not prepare him to see, has developed the specific calibration to unexpected events that working on Wabash Avenue for 5 years produces. He has not seen this before. He picks up the scissors. He continues the cut. The 5 people on the floor of the barbershop find their way to various degrees of returning to functional awareness across the next 90 seconds. They do this in the specific way of people whose nervous systems have received a significant amount of information in a very short time, and who are working through the implications of that information while simultaneously working through the more immediate operational question of where their bodies are in space and what those bodies are currently capable of. The largest one reaches a seated position first. He sits on the floor of the barbershop with his back against the barber's supply shelf, and he looks at Bruce in the third chair receiving the continuation of his haircut, and he does not say anything. He does not say anything because he does not have anything to say. This is the specific condition of someone who came into a room with a complete and operating understanding of how the room would go, and who is now in possession of the information that the understanding was wrong in a way that is so complete and so fast and so without the drama that wrong understandings usually produce, without the fight that was supposed to happen, and the escalation, and the eventual result, without any of the narrative that the understanding predicted, that there is no language available for the gap between the understanding and the outcome. Raymond Dubois continues cutting Marcus's hair. Jerome continues working on the young man with the photograph. The man on the bench picks his newspaper back up. The radio plays something that Raymond still has not changed because the station is still playing things he likes. The largest one gets to his feet. He does it with the specific deliberateness of a person managing their physical reality very carefully, taking inventory as they go, confirming that the inventory is complete and functional before committing more weight to it. He looks at Bruce. Bruce is in the mirror. He is looking at his own reflection the way people look at their reflections when a barber is working, and the reflection is the primary available information about how the work is going. He is not looking at the largest one. The largest one stands for a moment in the barber shop. Then he moves toward the door. The other four move behind him in the same order they entered, the largest one first and the others in configuration. But the configuration is different now in the specific way that the configuration of people leaving a room is always different from the configuration of the same people entering the same room, when what happened in the room in between altered something about how the configuration understands itself. They go through the door closes, the Wabash Avenue traffic continues its sound through the front glass, the radio plays, Eddie continues the cut. Nobody says anything for a full minute. Not because there is a prohibition on speaking, because the room is doing what rooms do after significant events, when the people in them have enough experience to understand that the significant event has produced something that speaking too quickly would reduce. Then Raymond says, without looking up from Marcus, in the specific tone of a man making an observation about the weather or the traffic or any of the ordinary facts of a Thursday afternoon on Wabash Avenue, "Eddie, you doing all right over there?" Eddie says, "Yes, sir." Raymond says, "Good." He makes one precise cut on Marcus's left side. He says, "Marcus, you need a trim on the neck, or you good Marcus," who has been very still in the second chair since the door opened, and who is now performing the slow, careful return to ordinary embodiment that the last several minutes required him to leave, says, "Trim on the neck." "Please." Raymond nods. He picks up the clippers. The shop returns to itself. Not to what it was before the door opened, because rooms do not return to what they were before significant events, because significant events alter rooms in the way that all true experiences alter the spaces that contain them, but to the ongoing version of itself. The version that continues after the event has been absorbed into the room's history alongside the previous 18 years of history, alongside everything else Wabash Avenue has deposited in these walls since 1954. Bruce's cut takes another 12 minutes. Eddie finishes with the specific, careful attention he brought to it from the beginning, undiminished by the intervening minutes, restored to the quality of work that the craft requires by the simple act of continuing to do the craft, which is the only restoration available and which is always sufficient when the person doing the craft is the kind of person Eddie is. Bruce looks at the finished cut in the mirror. He says, "That is good work." Eddie says, "Thank you." There is a pause. Eddie says, "Do you want to tell me what just happened?" Bruce looks at him in the mirror. He says, "5 people came into the shop. They did not want haircuts." Eddie says, "And now they are gone." Bruce says, "Yes." Eddie says, "I have been in this shop 5 years." Bruce says, "I know. It shows in the work." Eddie looks at him in the mirror for a moment. He says, "You know what the part I cannot figure out is?" Bruce waits. Eddie says, "You sat back down." Bruce says, "The cut was not finished." Eddie says, "After all that, you sat back down because the cut was not finished." Bruce says, "Yes." Eddie is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "That is either the calmest thing I have ever seen or the most matter-of-fact thing I have ever seen, and I cannot decide which one." Bruce says, "They are the same thing." He pays. He tips generously, the tip of a person who understands that what Eddie did in the 12 minutes after the 5 people left was not a small thing, that continuing the cut with the quality the cut required was its own form of the same principle, the ongoing work regardless of what the room had just contained. He goes to the door. Raymond says, from the second chair where he is finishing Marcus's trim, "Come back next time you're in Chicago," Bruce says, "I will." He goes out through the door. He turns north on Wabash Avenue. He walks in the barbershop on Wabash. Raymond finishes Marcus. Jerome finishes the young man with the photograph. The man on the bench gets into the 4th chair. Eddie sweeps the 3rd chair area, the accumulated hair of the cut, the ordinary evidence of the ordinary work. He sweeps carefully. He is a craftsman, and craftsmen sweep carefully because the work does not end when the cutting ends. The work is the whole of it. Marcus, putting on his jacket to leave, stops at the door and looks at Raymond. He says, "Raymond, who was that man?" Raymond says, "Customer." Marcus says, "Raymond." Raymond looks up from the chair he is preparing for the next customer. He says, "His name is Bruce Lee." Marcus looks at the third chair. He looks at the door. He looks at Raymond. He says, "I thought so." He goes out. Raymond looks at the door for a moment after Marcus leaves. Then he goes back to his preparation. The next customer is already in the chair. There is work to do. There is always work to do in a shop that has been open since 1954, and that will be open tomorrow and the day after that, because Wabash Avenue continues regardless of what Thursday afternoons deposit in the rooms along it. The 60 seconds that the barbershop held that afternoon are not discussed outside the room, not because anyone was warned not to discuss them, not because a specific decision was made. Because the 6 people who were in the room when the 60 seconds happened each arrived independently at the same understanding about what discussing them would produce, which is a description smaller than the thing being described, an account that cannot survive the translation from what was witnessed to what words can carry, an account that would require the listener to trust in what the teller reports rather than what the teller can demonstrate, and that the teller would know was smaller than the truth the moment the first word of the account left their mouth. You had to be there. And being there was enough. Being there was more than enough. Raymond Dubois kept his shop on Wabash Avenue until 2003, when his knees made the standing too expensive to continue. In 46 years of operating it, he never once discussed the 60 seconds of May 4, 1972, with anyone who was not in the room. When his nephew Jerome, many years later, asked him why not, he said, "Some things you keep because keeping them is the only way to have them right." Jerome thought about this for a while. Then he said, "You think about it, though?" Raymond said, "Every Thursday."